couple more tips for you. You have some anchors. One is that the courts don't like generic large buffers. And the reason they don't is they have an undue impact on property rights with no showing of any real benefit. If government, they say, wants to have these huge, like 65% set-asides, no-build zones, 150-foot generic buffers, government is supposed to do its work, show its homework, and demonstrate to the courts and the public that these type of buffers, one-size-fit-all buffers, are really needed. Generic buffers are a cop-out for government. The second thing we have is, despite, and I lost the Blakely Harbor dock case, the court upheld a ban on private docks. But the court didn't ban docks in Blakely Harbor. The court decided that 2 community docks, which 5 slips apiece, plus a public dock, would adequately allow access to the water, such that a proliferation of a number of individual private docks could be prohibited in that harbor. And I have another case where the Shoreline Hearings Board said you can't have a hard rock protected bulkhead and a particularly critical feeder buff, but you can have a hybrid that has rock components and non-rock components. So now if you talk to city staff, they can ban docks anywhere on Bainbridge and you can't have a bulkhead. That's not what the cases say. There's still cases about balance. A couple more things. If there's one thing that's ignored, here's how, if you're an environmentalist and you're a staff person that believes your function in life is to tell people no, here's how you do it. You go to seminars, you look at studies like the seawall at Lincoln Park. It was built hundreds of feet below the ordinary high water mark. It had devastating impacts on the shoreline environment. You take a large, or you look at the railroad tracks that are built into the shoreline along Puget Sound, which have had long-term negative impacts on the shoreline environment. And suddenly bulkheads are bad. The problem is you can't get a bulkhead approved now unless it's at or above the ordinary high water mark and you mitigate for all impacts. We can show in our mitigation on Bainbridge that the fish mix we put down on the beach is more beneficial for fish than the silts and materials that may episodically erode off a bank, which have very little benefit for fish or forage fish spawning because they're excessively composed of fine materials. But you get something and you say it all the time. Bulkheads are bad. The studies show that. When you look at studies on the Maryland East Coast, you look at the Lincoln study, and suddenly these are all the studies. They're best available science. You go to the actual symposiums, which I quote in my comment letters, and the scientists say that in the Pacific Northwest we have no good studies on cause and effect and negative impacts of bulkheads, and it needs to be studied. The scientists say we have very little knowledge about the value of the upland riparian zones, say 50 to 75 or 100 feet from the ordinary high water mark, as to low intensity development like shoreline homes. We really don't have the science. So you take science, you quote it out of context, and then suddenly you have your mission. We're going to ban things, and we're going to tell people they can't do things. That's what I'm seeing in these, that's what I saw in Jefferson County, and that's what, at least the initial drafts, when we started in 2001 when this whole thing started, that's what I saw from staff. I'm hoping that your group, I've urged that your group hire a scientist. They don't have to sit through every meeting of the scientific committee. Once they have the draft available, the draft science together, have it critically analyzed by an expert, and then put in your own studies to balance it. That's just simply good public decision making. So let me summarize on this point, because when you glaze over, I'm probably losing you. It's be wary of science. It's misquoted and misapplied. There is no question that a poorly designed marine project without mitigation has had and will have significant adverse impacts. But that's not the type of development we're talking about in Bainbridge Island. A modern, well-designed bulkhead at or above the ordinary high water mark impacts, if any, are almost immeasurable. Forage fish spawn at about the plus 10.6 elevation on the beach is the highest they will spawn. A bulkhead at or above the ordinary head water mark is a foot and a half to 2 feet above that elevation, which in a width could be from here to this wall or further. If you build a bulkhead that's outside of the spawning habitat, I challenge you to say how you're damaging the habitat. And you hear all the arguments, there's scour, and we studied this and there was scour somewhere. I'm talking about site-specific studies which have really demonstrated. Bainbridge Island has 58% of the shoreline bulkheaded. According to Peter Best and the scientist, that should have resulted in unbelievable beach starvation and damage to important spawning habitat in this island. But they can't document that kind of impact. They can't document that kind of impact because it's not there. So, on the legal issues, you have some friends. Generic buffers are disfavored by the court. And if you balance the science, all you have to do is neutralize the science, make it fair, make it actually best available science, which means you put in the studies that the regulators don't like. And number 3, insist upon cause and effect. If we go through this Shoreline Master Program update, and we will, and staff is telling the City Council we need all these new laws, where's the audit of the existing regulatory system that demonstrates it's not working? Just because they think development is bad is a cop-out. Where's the analysis or audit that these laws are not working? Jefferson County is doing a very good job on that. They've got the county commissioners to agree to hire outside expertise to actually review the regulatory system.